right, everyone, welcome. Thanks for coming. My name's John. This is a session focused on the Windows development platform. And what I'm going to be doing in this session is walking you through your options available to you as a developer targeting Windows, building rich desktop applications. Hopefully you've kept an eye on what's been happening at Build. There's lots of announcements that have come out there. I've actually spent the time to look at what's been happening there, and I'm going to be talking about it in this session here today. My role on the team, I'm a member of the developer relations team at Progress. We're a team that helps engage with the developer community worldwide, and typically you'll see us online through various events, whether they're webinars or such. If you've watched a Telerik webinar or a Windows UI webinar, chances are you've heard my voice. So with that, let's get started. To begin, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the state of Windows development as it exists today. Obviously, Windows development is a long understood domain for developers, and I want to just give a lay of the land of where things sit today. Obviously, Windows 10 market share is quite good. We have over 800 million active devices on the Windows 10 platform as it stands today, and the state of the .NET development platform is very strong. There are a number of programs, and in addition to that, there are a number of reasons why I think the Windows development platform is a very vibrant one, and we'll talk a little bit about that in these next few slides. But what the takeaway for this is that Windows itself is a very viable platform for you to target your apps for. Despite the fact that obviously everyone's moving towards things like web and mobile, I think for very specific scenarios, Windows is an excellent candidate for building apps. Last year, we published this white paper called The State of .NET. If you've seen it, you obviously know that it's a pretty extensive white paper talking about the way that .NET's going. We actually have a section on .NET development as it targets the desktop. But if you want, you can go check this out. But obviously, where have we gone since that time? This slide I actually took from one of the slides presented yesterday at a presentation done at Build. .NET growth is continuing to increase over time. Since December, we've seen a huge uptake in the number of activations of Visual Studio. In addition to that, we have greater than 1 million developers targeting .NET Core through a combination of Visual Studio for Mac, and VS Code, which is astounding. In addition to that, we've got some great progress done in the realm of Forms and WPF, which are now available as open source. These are now targeting .NET Core, and you can go ahead and grab the source and see how that project is improving. The reason why this is relevant to mention in this talk is because as you start to look at building your apps towards .NET and the future of .NET, obviously .NET Core, which is now known as .NET 3, which is going to migrate into .NET 5 next year, is going to be very relevant. The same can be said also for WPF. WPF is also now available as open source on GitHub. In addition to that, there's been a lot of momentum with the projects being available as open source. There's a huge community around these two projects, and as you can see by the data presented yesterday at Build, there's been a huge number of pull requests and issues submitted by the community at large. So lots of activity going on there. So relevant to what we're building with desktop development and applications targeting the desktop, obviously you have a lot of choices there. When it comes to .NET Core 3, which is the next evolution of where .NET is going, obviously there are a number of technologies that are being brought to bear. So Windows Forms, WPF, and now UWP, which was recently added to the roadmap, are being added as desktop packs to .NET Core 3. It should be noted that this is Windows only. And it's not obviously cross-platform, but it does give you a lot of great advantages going to .NET Core 3. In addition to UWP being added to the roadmap, obviously that includes .NET Standard 2.1 and all the C# 8 features, excuse me, not Windows 8, C# 8 features that are coming to the platform. Additionally to that, there's a number of frameworks and SDKs that you can use to access the Windows 10 APIs. As I talked about the ecosystem before, obviously one of the key highlights for this one is the Windows Insider program for developers. This is an excellent program. If you're not a member of this program, you really should join. This is a program that's been around since September of 2014. And in just 1 year since its inception, it had over 7 million people as part of that program, which is excellent. And for developers, it's an awesome program because you get constant insider preview updates, which are incredibly helpful for you as a developer targeting the platform. Another reason why the state of Windows development is excellent is because obviously the enormous ISV ecosystem around Windows itself. Telerik is obviously a set of tools that allow you to target Windows, and Progress is obviously an ISV that cares very much about that ecosystem. So lots of great tools for that. And this is exampled why vendors, well, Telerik UI for Blazor. This is an example of the fact that Blazor is one of the latest new things from Microsoft, and we're able to stay ahead of the curve and support developers by allowing them to build apps with Blazor. So if you haven't seen already, we've actually got a UI control set already for Blazor available for you to check out. As far as tooling is concerned, lots of great support for desktop development with tooling. Visual Studio 2017 is one example. It's an excellent environment for building modern desktop applications with technologies like WinForms, like WPF, like UWP. Of course, this is carried forward in an excellent design time, dev time experience in Visual Studio 2019. Again, another excellent environment for doing desktop development. The reason why you want to target perhaps Visual Studio 2019 is because there are many improvements to the design time experience. A lot of additional features have come into the product. It's incredibly fast, compiles incredibly well. It's really useful for your development. One thing I should say about the state of Windows development is the fact that Visual Studio, the installer technology, is excellent. And the reason why I highlight this here is because oftentimes when you're looking to incorporate new technologies, it can sometimes obviously cause problems which would maybe force you to repave your machine. And the the Visual Studio installer is excellent. You can install multiple versions of Visual Studio side by side. And the reason why you want to do this is because obviously new features come aboard, and you want to take advantage of those when building out applications. And I found that the Visual Studio installer allows you to separate those very nicely. In fact, I've got 3 instances of Visual Studio running side by side on my Windows 10 instance, and it's great. And obviously, Visual Studio Code doesn't really need much mention. It's a wonderful text editor, provides a number of great capabilities. So there you go. Now, when we talk about obviously building for the desktop, one of the things that you'll find as a challenge is if you're maintaining an application built with WinForms or UWP or WPF, is how do I go ahead and modernize that to, say, the next iteration of Windows 10, or how can I incorporate the latest features in Windows 10 inside of those applications? And there's a number of ways to do this. Obviously, the canonical way is obviously to port your application to .NET Core 3. So support for WPF, WinForms, and XAML Islands was added in Preview 1. And this is an important note to make about this, which is cross-platform is not in the current plan. So if your hope is that you'll be able to take your Windows Form or WPF application to another platform like macOS or Linux, that's not part of the plan. And while .NET Core 3 is a cross-platform framework, WPF and WinForms will be Windows only. So that will be built on top of .NET Core 3. You get tons of advantages when you go to .NET Core 3, that being said. So you get deployment flexibility. You can install side by side. There's a lot of great advantages going to .NET Core. Machine global or app local framework support. You got this notion of what are called self-contained exes, which they talked a little bit about at Build yesterday, where you can actually compile down into just what's needed. And one of the sessions yesterday at Build, they talk about tree shaking, which is this idea that you can take an application and inspect it and basically just get advantage of only those APIs that are being used and trim off basically all the APIs that aren't necessary, the functions, if you will, and provide that as a self-contained exe. In addition to these improvements, obviously there's a lot of performance enhancements that are going into .NET Core 3 as well. It's easy to use and test .NET Core applications, and so you just have one app on one machine, and you don't have this challenge of deploying an app across an enterprise where you say have 4,000 machines running .NET Framework 4, and you're trying to get them all to 4.8, for example. It's a challenge that obviously is isolated when running on .NET Core. Some other improvements, obviously, because the fact that we're targeting .NET Core, access to the full Windows API, Windows 10 API is great. There's a number of APIs that you can target with a number of frameworks that are available. One example is the SDK contracts. which is made available. There's a compatibility toolkit as well, which we'll highlight. The ability to host UWP XAML controls in WPF and WinForms applications, a notion which is called XAML islands. This idea is you can actually take parts of your application, host them as a UWP self-contained part. Other aspects of modernizing your application obviously include your data access. So when it comes to .NET Core 3, ADO.NET can be used. However, not all data source providers will be supported. And currently, right now, they're doing a lot of work around Entity Framework 6. So it's being updated to work on .NET Core, and EF Core right now is currently supported when it comes to data access. There are some other things as well when modernizing your application, obviously connecting to service endpoints, because WCF has been partially ported to .NET Core 3, but there's no support for example, the WCF server. So things like that you need to think about. The good news there is that there's a lot of information online about this and a lot of tools available that are coming to bear to help you do this. One example of the contracts SDK is something like this, for example. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and attach an event button handler to, say, a WinForms application. And simply by utilizing these contracts, I can access parts of the Windows 10 machine, such as geolocation, to call those APIs and output the values to a text box. So this image was presented back in May of 2018. This is 1 year ago, and the idea was that when modernizing applications, you would take these desktop packs and you would utilize these in combination of other technologies with .NET Core 3. From a 1,000 meter view, if you will, you can think of WPF as a rich layer over DirectX and WinForms as a thinner layer over GDI+. And so there are technologies and dependencies there which is requiring them to be desktop packs. These desktop packs allow you to target existing apps to .NET Core, and so .NET Core 3 with these desktop packs is allowing you to target these sort of rich APIs to bring these to .NET Core 3 going forward. So if you take a look at an example, .NET Core 3 with an existing desktop application, you need to target .NET Core 3 and recompile. There are some changes that need to be done against project files, and dependencies that you build into your project do not need to be retargeted and recompiled. They were just picked up as you go. There's this compatibility pack, which is great. It's a NuGet package. It's Microsoft.Windows.compatibility. And what this provides is over 21,000 APIs that were not included in .NET Standard that you can use. And this is basically, should be used with the Platform Compatibility Analyzer, which is basically a Roslyn analyzer that finds all the usages of APIs that you call and will throw exceptions if they're not supported on certain platforms. So that's a tool that you can use in the instance of porting over to a different platform. So when you talk about other aspects of migrating to, for example, .NET Core or utilizing various aspects of the platform for targeting desktop, there are a lot of tools involved. One tool that I like immensely is the Windows Template Studio. And this is an extension that's built into Visual Studio that allows you to create new WPF applications, new UWP applications using a wizard-like experience. And I created some screenshots here, but I'll show you an example of this in just a second. The idea is that through a WYSIWYG a wizard-like experience, you can navigate and add various parts and pieces to your application using this utility. So it can ask for things like what design patterns you want to incorporate, what frameworks you want to use, what kind of pages you want to have in your application, and what kind of other aspects you want in your application itself. To show you an example of this, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into my VM here. And to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and mirror my display. There we go. So the way this works is, hopefully you can see this here. I'll just go full screen so I'll make it easier for you. Excellent. So the Windows Template Studio is a tool that integrates with Visual Studio, as I said before, and allows you to basically incorporate various aspects into an application for building UWP apps quickly and easily. So if I wanted to, I could go ahead and fire up Visual Studio. I'm using here the 2019 preview, but you can use 2017 if you wish. So I can create a new project here, and as you can see, this is the new project design tool. This is how you create a new project in VS19, and there's a variety of applications types you can create. So I can create a new application here and build it off there if I want. So for example, I can create a new application here and go through the steps of creating it if I wish. Alternatively, I can take a look at using the Windows Template Studio if I wanted, but there's a lot of great features built in here if I wanted to use them. Another aspect of this, of course, is utilizing some of the frameworks and toolkits that are available for Visual Studio, a lot of which are actually supported inside of Visual Studio 2019. For example, our Telerik UI controls are there as well, so you can certainly use those if you wish. So when it comes to frameworks, there's a lot of different frameworks you can use for building out these applications. One example of this is the Windows Community Toolkit. This is a set of UI controls that allow you to build out applications very quickly and easily. These are all available as open source, and there's a GitHub repo for them. So you can see there's a wide variety of controls available there for any types of use cases you have for building out a UWP application. There are also some wrap controls there for WPF and WinForms as well, and you can utilize those very easily. And they also provide code examples for each one of those as well. To show you an example of this, I'll just jump over to the Community Toolkit here to show you some examples of the tool in action. So this is an app you can download from the Windows Store, and it will show you the controls in action. So there's a variety of controls that are built in here. You can see some of them here. For example, what's new. You can see we have animation library support for a variety of behaviors and effects that you want to conduct, say on various elements. There are a variety of controls that are also built in here as well. So if I wanted to, I could incorporate say a people picker application, and what we get here is a generated XAML for that application that I can then incorporate into my application if I wish. Other controls that are useful include things like an orbit view. I did a presentation at Build 2 years ago where this was added as an example to the Community Toolkit, and this is a nice way of representing spatial objects, obviously. You can use it for examples like with people or nearby devices, and it gives you aspects of that. And as I said earlier, it will generate the XAML for you as well, so you can get a sense of what it looks like there. There's also in addition to the controls, there's also a variety of what are called helpers. These are things that are often useful to developers when building out applications. So if they're building out a UWP application that wants to incorporate a live tile, for example, or another example might be integration with an RSS feed, or the ability to parse Markdown, for example. These and other aspects are available as helpers. Services is the ability to incorporate a variety of online services like Facebook or LinkedIn, and they provide an integration point for you to incorporate going forward, and will generate the code for you doing that. So these are kind of like wrappers around those service endpoints for you to use. So that's an example of the Windows Community Toolkit, and this is one of many products that are available out there for you to use if you're interested for targeting UWP. Now, the reason why I mention this is because if you've got an existing application built in WinForms or WPF, obviously this is going to be something that may not be approachable to you, but is something that can be incorporated through XAML islands. And the idea here is that the Windows Community Toolkit, while useful, is just targeting UWP, but you can certainly incorporate those controls within a WinForms or WPF app through this technology. So this is the ability to host these UWP controls within a non-UWP desktop application. And this is available in Windows 10, I believe version 1903 or later. So one of the more recent builds. And it allows you to incorporate those aspects, sorry, I don't know why that's up there. Allows you to incorporate those aspects inside of your non-UWP application. And so essentially, there's two ways that you can incorporate XAML islands. You can either use the Windows SDK toolkit, which is available, and through that, there's a variety of WinRT classes and COM interfaces that you can target. And there's a particular UI element class that you can target for that. Or alternatively, you can use the Windows Community Toolkit for incorporating those aspects or elements into your library. So if you're targeting WPF or WinForms, there's a group of wrap controls, as I mentioned earlier, and those are available through the toolkit itself. It should be noted that V1 of this technology shipped yesterday. So that's great. Another example of a toolkit that you can use for building out desktop applications is the Windows UI Library. And this is a set of official native Windows UI controls for UI elements and again for UWP apps. And so there's a variety of different controls that are available as part of that. It supports Fluent design and will also generate the XAML necessary for that as well. The reason why this is useful is, of course, because it provides these controls. It's available up on GitHub as open source and provides backward compatible versions of these features using these controls, including the styles. So if you're wanting to target Fluent, which is the design language for Windows 10, you can certainly do that. There is a set of APIs, low-level APIs for middleware components, which is available through Microsoft.ui.xaml.core.direct. And it provides sort of a standard way for middleware authors to use the XAML Direct APIs on earlier versions of Windows 10 without needing to write special code for targeting those specific versions. So it provides a really nice solution when targeting those aspects. And jumping back into my instance here, there is a client application as well for that. Which is also available up on the Windows Store. And so, oops, I don't know why that's open there. That's all right, we'll come back to it. Another toolkit you can use, obviously, is one from us, which is Telerik UI for WinForms. And this is a UI library that provides a whole set of controls for you to use. And we've shipped a lot of controls in here. There's over 70 controls inside of Telerik UI for WinForms. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, I'll jump over to my instance here and just show you what's in there. If you're building WinForms applications, there are a number of controls that might be useful for you inside of this control toolkit. There we go. One of the things to mention is we were one of the first WinForm vendors to support the Fluent design interface in WinForms. So you may notice there's a little bit of transparency on the menus here. It's hard to see on the projection device, but on the screen here it looks translucent. We have a number of features coming in our R2 release, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But essentially, there's a whole host of controls that you can use here, including some of the controls that we talked about in the keynote earlier today, like our conversational UI controls. This allows you to build out what are known as chatbots, and that's a really interesting redraw. So there's things like chat UI or conversational UI controls. We have a variety of other controls as well for things like charts, for grids, etc. And these are incredibly useful to use, obviously, within an application. These are all themable, so you can customize the look and feel of each one of these, and we support over 20 themes as part of Telerik UI for WinForms. And these are used across a whole host of applications you see in the wild. And some of them are great for line of business applications, and others are used in other types of contexts as well. Speaking of some of the new ones, we've got some new controls that are built into the R1 release, and in R2 we're going to add just more and more controls to that set of collection. All right. So that's Telerik UI for WinForms. Telerik UI for WPF obviously is another control set you can use. Again, number of controls available in there as well. This is an immensely powerful and popular control toolkit that a lot of folks are using, and I'll just quickly show you some of the controls that we ship in there. Again, this is available on the Windows Store, so you can download this example and play with it there if you wish. So you can see we have a variety of controls in here, things for like grids, for charts, for PDF viewing. These are great to integrate inside of an application. We even have like things like a spreadsheet control. And we generate all the code for you to show you how this all works. So if you're looking to embed some Excel-like environment within your application, we have controls for doing that. We also have things like diagrams, schedule views, docking elements, etc. And they're all themable, of course, as well. In addition to the WinForms being Fluent design oriented, this is as well. It's hard to see on the projection device, but this is translucent, and we do support that theme as well as many other themes. And you can also utilize not only light, but also a dark theme as well. So these are all features built into the UI control set that you see here, and is available obviously as part of that tool set. So you can see there's a large ecosystem around Windows development, which is excellent. And this sort of traditional model of targeting .NET through technologies like UWP, WinForms, as well as WPF, makes it a very viable option for targeting through traditional means. That being said, there are a list of alternatives that you can consider. Some of them I mentioned here. One is called Chromely. The idea here is that you can target, obviously, an application for Windows using Electron as a host container, and then .NET Core or other aspects of .NET as the underlying bits or plumbing. So Electron is a host container for desktop applications that allows you to host your application using sort of like a web view. So you can actually create a front-end UI using web views, and then underpin that using any technology you wish, whether it's Angular, React, or .NET Core for .NET. Another example is Avalonia, which is a bit of a stale project at the moment. It's a WPF-inspired cross-platform XAML-based UI framework. And it's got a flexible styling system and supports a wide variety of OSs. It is currently in beta, however, it hasn't been updated in a long while. It's been stalled a bit. So beta 1 shipped back in February of last year. So it is another example to take note of. One of the more recent applications that we've shipped, and you may have heard of, is this application called Fiddler Everywhere. I mentioned it here and I highlight it here because Fiddler Everywhere is actually an example of an application we built. It's a desktop application, but it uses a combination of technologies like Electron and CanDUI for Angular and .NET Core. So one of the things we did was we took Fiddler Core and we compiled it to .NET Core. And when we did that, it suddenly became viable as a cross-platform target. So Fiddler Everywhere is the evolution of Fiddler, and it is a tool that now runs cross-platform through Electron and .NET Core itself. So for the guts, we use .NET Core, and we use a front-end UI based on CanDUI for Angular to display through an Electron shell. And so this is another example. If you're building out a new application, you have developers who have existing web skills of being able to target that type of application domain. In addition to that, apart from all the announcements that came across, one of the announcements that was highlighted yesterday at Build was React Native for Windows. And so the idea here is that you can actually target native Windows apps with React. I don't really have much experience with React Native, so I won't talk too much about it here, but I just thought I'd highlight it here as an example target that you can certainly consider. So I did want to spend just a little bit of time talking a little bit about what's next. And to that, I want to basically point to the future as well as in terms of desktop development and where we're headed. And obviously, given the recent announcements we've had at Build, I thought it would be a good sort of avenue or opportunity to explore what's coming. So this is a slide that was presented yesterday at Build, and the announcement that was made was that .NET Core 3 is going to evolve into .NET 5. And so the core in .NET Core is essentially going away. And this basically represents the next step in the evolution of .NET Core. .NET 5 is an important project, and it's going to improve .NET in a number of ways. One is it's going to produce a single .NET runtime. So and in addition to that, and framework. At the time, right now, there are a variety of jitters, there's a variety of runtimes, there's a variety of frameworks that are available, and so .NET 5 is this realization of bringing those all under one banner. In addition to that, it's going to expand the capabilities currently presented by .NET Core, and it's going to add capabilities from the best of .NET Framework, Xamarin, Mono, etc. And so the idea is that you'll build a product out of a single code base, and they can work on that and expand together as these improvements evolve over time. So essentially with .NET 5, your code and project files will look and feel the same no matter what type of app you're building. And you'll have access to the same runtime, the same API and language capabilities for each app. And this includes the new performance improvements that are coming that have been committed to CoreFX, which is the framework, and that's being built on quite a bit. .NET 5 will also ship, just as I mentioned, next year in November. And the first preview of it will be available in the first half of 2020. And it will be supported with future updates of Visual Studio 2019 and Visual Studio for Mac and Visual Studio Code. To give you a sense of what that looks like, here's the schedule that they talked about yesterday. So currently, .NET Core 3 RC is scheduled for July. And then from there, you can see we're ramping up to the general release of .NET Core 3. The long-term support will be added to .NET Core 3.1. So long-term support is the support policy that Microsoft provides to organizations who are betting on technologies. And so that will be added in November 2019, so essentially later this year. .NET 5 general release will be available in November 2020, and then every year subsequent will be a new release of .NET from there. And so when considering your desktop development, obviously it's something to be aware of, but hopefully if you're talking to your manager or stakeholders at the company and you're considering .NET as a key aspect of your Windows development, this should hopefully, because Microsoft has published the schedule, hopefully make you feel better about that commitment. And again, this was published yesterday, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to add here. To give you a heads up on what's coming for our control toolkits, obviously with WinForms, we're adding a whole bunch of capabilities going forward. So some examples include, we're planning to include some theming to our file dialogues. So that will provide a consistent user experience across all your WinForm applications. And that can be Fluent, Material, Office inspired, you name it. We're adding a new control called domain up down. And this is also on our roadmap for the following year and enables users of the app to easily switch and select between a list of items presented in a text box, either by a button, keyboard, or by typing. We're also adding a couple of other controls, like a touch keyboard. And this has been a highly requested feature. Allows your end users of an application to fully touch keyboard as part of an application. And Sparkline is another controller we're going to be adding as well. It's kind of like these little mini charts that you can incorporate into an application graph or table-like structure. So these ones are, I think, shipping in the R2 release, which is going to be very soon. And if not R2, or definitely R3. But this is our publisher roadmap for 2019. And obviously, there's a big disclaimer with this. Obviously, things can change. So yeah, just keep an eye on the roadmap and our updates, and we'll be updating as according. In WPF for 2019, got a lot of updates coming there, looking at things like a simplified ribbon to improve the look and navigation of your WPF applications using the latest trends provided by Microsoft. We're adding a new webcam control, for example. This is the able to enable a web or USB camera video stream into a WPF built application. That's also on our roadmap. Other ones include, for example, improvements to the rich text box, which is a very popular control for Telerik UI for WPF. We're adding new controls like a task board, and this is another one that we're looking like a Kanban style control that allows your users to add interactive task scheduling and prioritization. So lots of stuff coming in Telerik UI for WPF going forward. And so hopefully this will meet a requirement if you're targeting, obviously, Telerik UI for WPF. Cool. So I went through that content pretty quickly, but just wanted to mention a couple of related sessions. We've got a session coming up featuring Fiddler Everywhere. I wanted to mention this session because obviously the way it's been built, I thought it would be interesting just to hear a little bit more from Carmen about what's coming. And that's, again, obviously targeting Electron, .NET Core, etc. And then Carl's got the big session. This is the one I wanted to do, but he stole it from me, which is fine. What's coming in R2, the R2 release for Telerik and UI. So again, that's on May 9th, and Carl's going to be highlighting all the great new features that are dropping in our R2 release. If you're at the booths at the conference, feel free to say hi. Happy to chat with you. And I'll just break to see if you guys have any questions. No? Cool. Just want to also just mention that the tooling support is excellent for WinForms and WPF with .NET Core today. So just to show you one last can demo here, this is Visual Studio 2019, and there's now support in here for building WPF and Windows Forms applications using .NET Core. The screen here is so bad you can't see it, but in white text there it says WPF app, and then in brackets it says .NET Core. So you can target .NET Core for WPF now, and this is using the very latest bits. I downloaded Preview 5 of .NET Core 3 late this morning, or late last night, earlier this morning, to show you guys this. So I can go ahead and create a WPF app that's targeting .NET Core inside of VS 2019 Preview, and it works with our tool set, and I was able to build an application quite nicely, and there's lots of advantages for doing this way. And fundamentally, I mean, the idea here is that your development practices and the way you do development using WPF shouldn't change, nor should it change with WinForms. But the compile target will certainly change going forward, obviously, as part of that. So yeah, definitely something worth noting. This is a preview build, so obviously, use it with some caution. But as I said earlier, the Visual Studio installer is rock solid in my experience, and has been great at allowing me to run side by side. So, nothing flash here, but that is WPF running on .NET Core. And you can do the same, obviously, with WinForms. I have been able to create an application using our extensions. To show you an example here, this is a project, one of the templates that we ship as part of Telerik UI for WPF, and this is targeting .NET Core as well. And so this is one of the templates that we provide. You have to kind of rebuild it to make the designer work. Sometimes you have to close it and open the designer. The designer can be a bit finicky, but it does work and allows you to target, obviously, .NET Core, which is great. There you go. So that's one of the templates we provide out of the box. There are like 5 that we ship as part of the design experience. But essentially, this is .NET Core 3, Preview 5, running WPF applications on Windows. And just to complete the story here, I'll show you the other example, which is for WinForms. And obviously, there's a little bit of a context switch, so obviously we'll go faster when the technology improves a little bit. So here's an example of another template we ship as part of Telerik UI for WinForms. And this is showing the Outlook, or calendar rather, template that you can build out. Neat. Any questions? Great. Again, my name is John Bristow. Thank you very much for attending today's session, and feel free to jump by the booth and come say hi. If you have any questions, I'll be there. Cheers, guys.